The Bank of Mum and Dad has become a financial institution that will only grow more influential over time. Everyone seems to acknowledge that it's there, but there doesn't seem to be anyone who acknowledges how influential it is. What options or hope does the panel have for younger Australians who do not have access to this bank?
Max.
Yeah, great question. And effectively what we've got now, increasingly, is a feudal system where if your parents are wealthy enough, then bam, you get a home. And there'll be parents listening to this right now, teachers, cleaners, people who feel sad, maybe even a bit guilty about the fact that they can't help their kid buy a home. And my message for them, it is not your fault. It is not your fault. But what it is the fault of, to be frank, and again, we just keep talking about tinkering around the edges. Let's be very clear. The biggest increase in home ownership in Australian political history was post-World War II. And guess what we did then? We capped rent increases. We built, in the first 10 years after 1945, 100,000 public homes. And guess what we did? We rented them and sold them to people for below market prices, what the Greens are proposing to do now. And we didn't have the capital gains tax discount. Now, and we didn't have a tax system that encouraged people to treat housing as a huge lucrative investment. Andrew, you said before that you don't want to inflate demand. But that's an argument against negative gearing and the capital gains tax discount, which, by the way, will cost the federal budget billions and billions of dollars, inflating demand for property investors. And my message to you is, unless both major political parties come back to the major three solutions that work, mass build of public housing, capping rent increases so people like Paige don't have to cop unfair rent increases that might push her again into homelessness. And again, I note that no major party will address the fact that the major reason people are going into homelessness is because of increasing rents. 58% of people accessing homelessness services, guess what they say? It's because of housing costs. So we can fix that for a start and deal with the tax system. And let's be real, we can have all the other kooky solutions we want. Until we do those three things and go back to what we did in the 20th century, we're not going to fix this housing crisis.
Rose.
I'm not going to be lectured by the Greens about kooky solutions.
Which one's kooky?
Sorry, PK.
No, do you think everything should be on the table? Would you like to see your federal colleagues look at capital gains tax concessions, negative gearing, all of it?
Yeah, so I am for everything on the table. But here's one thing that I won't do, which is take the easy route for a state politician and say, oh, well, actually, it's the Commonwealth's problem. They have to fix their tax system in immigration, or it's just actually local government. We need to change the way individual DAs are assessed. Both of those abdicate the responsibility that I have as a state politician to play a role and control the things that I can control. So sure, yes, I encourage every level of government to take seriously the responsibilities that they have. And that requires me to do the same. So as a state politician, in answer to your question, I absolutely agree that the current arrangements, as we said in answer to the very first question, are unfair. It is unfair that unless you have access to money through your family, through your parents, you're essentially locked out of the housing market. And we have to change that. And my strong view is that it is the delivery of more affordable housing that is the fundamental answer to that. And there is a role for the planning system in that. There is also a role, as I've said, for governments, state and federal, to contribute more money into delivering more social and affordable housing, direct intervention into that portion of the market. So we need to lift overall
Andrew,
stock and that.
I hear from Rose that she says she doesn't want to sort of shirk her responsibility. So on to yours. You know, you have a key role. You could advocate for a wholesale look at all of the different policies and the levers. Why not do it?
Absolutely. Well, to Vishwa's question directly, I'm concerned that the Bank of Mum and Dad simply doesn't work for a lot of young Australians. So we've got a program called Help to Buy, which is a shared equity scheme modelled on the successful schemes like Keystart in Western Australia, which operated under Labor and Liberal governments.
Sure, it's 10,000 places though, right?
But it's 10,000 targeted places. The Green scheme would be eligible, anybody in this panel would be eligible. This one is tightly targeted by income range to those who need it most. Help to Buy is currently being held up in the Senate by the Liberals and by the Greens. It's a shared equity scheme that can work, which allows people to get into home ownership with a deposit as low as 2%, with the Commonwealth going in as a shared equity partner and the ability to buy out the Commonwealth down the track. Okay. We know it can work. We've seen it work at the state level, and it directly, Vishwa, gets to that problem that you've talked about, that many people cannot rely on their parents to get into the market, and the Commonwealth is there to step up if only the Liberals and the Greens will stop blocking it.
Vishwa, it was a really good question. But I suppose when you're talking about disadvantaged people, there is no bank of mum and dad.
There is no bank of mum and dad, and for Aboriginal
and that
Torres
mum and
Strait
dad
Islander
also
people,
didn't have a bank.
Absolutely, they didn't have a bank, so there is absolutely nothing. So if you are lucky enough to have a bank and mum and dad, that is awesome. But again, we're not looking broad enough at this problem, because if you come from a family where there is a bank of mum and dad, there's a pretty good chance if you went to uni, your HECS fees were also paid. So are we also looking at those things that reduce our ability to spend? If education was free, oh my goodness, how much money would young people have in order to be able to start investing?
That sounds like a whole other episode. Andrew Bragg. You know, the Liberal Party used to talk about being the party of home ownership. You've been made the the shadow minister for home ownership, but that's declined under your watch too. The bank of mum and dad has thrived under your watch when you're in government too, hasn't it?
Well, I think the millennials and Gen Zs are on a pathway that we don't want to see. We want to see younger Australians own a house because that is the foundation for their financial success.
But do you take responsibility for how this built up?
Look, I think there's been a lack of supply for the last few years. Obviously, the issues are much more acute now under the current government, but I understand you're trying to make
I just think it's a longer running
broader
problem.
point, and I accept that. And my point is we want younger Australians to get access to housing because that is the key to their financial future. It's not another scheme or another government program. I think housing is at the centre of what we can do for young people, and that's why we're very committed to it.
And to finish tonight's discussion, here's a question